Welcome to the Brass Music Store podcast. For this episode, I'm talking to cornet legend Brian Taylor, who spent 45 years playing at the top of his game for the fabulous Faireys Band. Brian, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
This is not your first time to Ireland. You've been before.
This is my second visit.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you're very welcome back, and you're heading to Fermanagh this evening, I take it, for the.
Yes, you're quite right. Yes.
Yeah,
so...
yeah. And in a conversation before, Brian, you were telling me that you've been in Faireys for a long time, Brian, for a few months now.
Yes, you could say that. I joined the band perhaps just short. Well, I was 15 and a half perhaps, and I'm now, should I say 62 quietly? Don't mention that to anybody else. 62. So I'm not going to do the maths.
No.
But it's nearer 50 than 40 years.
Wow, that's some commitment.
Quite
Brian.
a long time, yeah.
That's some commitment. And you started off, you were telling me, as you worked in the Fairy factory then?
Yes, I got an apprenticeship. Lucky enough, I got an apprenticeship within the factory. And I was a toolmaker for 20 years, perhaps, something like that. 20 years.
And for the younger members of the brass band fraternity listening to this, just tell us what Faireys made then. What was their line of work?
Well, there was quite diverse in whatever. It was engineering, as in metal. It was all to do with that. Okay. They used to make. They had a big press shop there where they'd press out beer barrels or anything to do with pressing out, right. Pressing machine shop.
General sort of engineering.
General engineering, yeah.
And based where, Brian, then again, for people that don't know.
It's based in Stockport.
Yes.
And there's a big biscuit factory at the side of it, McVitie's.
Yes.
Factory, which is wonderful. When you turn up, you can smell the cooking of these biscuits every time you go to rehearsal, so it's wonderful.
Right.
It's worth going for that.
Right. And so your route into brass bands was a more old-fashioned route then, much like the colliery bands. It was a works band. Okay, Faireys was associated with the engineering, the same way that Black Dyke and Grimethorpe would have been associated with their industries.
It was. That's exactly the same. Black Dyke was with the mills, of course. And but I was just engineering, big engineering firm. I mean, when I first started there must have been above 6,000 people working there.
Really?
All cycling to work, you know.
Yes.
It
real Lowry something, real.
Yeah. It was a little bit like that,
yeah.
And always the characters. It was, you met characters and all sorts of characters. And majority of the band worked at the factory at the time.
I was going to ask you that. Was most of the band in?
Yes, yeah. I mean, when I went through the training school there, the first 12 months of my apprenticeship, we was in a training school which was, it might have had an intake of 25 young boys, as we were then.
Yes.
Young men. And we was in there 12 months learning how to do skills, different engineering skills. And my particular boss in that training school was a third cornet player who played in the band, a guy called Jack Hewitt.
Okay.
And it's definitely the irony about this thing. Whilst I was in work, I had to call him Mr. Hewitt. It was always Mr. Hewitt. As soon as I got in the band, I'd say, Mr. Hewitt, what we're doing, what we're doing tonight. He said, don't call me Mr. Hewitt when we're in band. It's always Jack.
All right.
So, I mean, it was the old school, I suppose, would be,
Yeah.
And it kept me on the straight and narrow. Yeah. But in those days, I mean, to me, to be 15, nearly 16, there wasn't many 16-year-old boys in the band. It was mature, grown-up people what was in the band then. So I was sat next to mature players, which, brought my playing on, I should say so.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And your own, but prior to that, Brian, your background was Salvation Army bands then.
Yeah. Yes, I did play in the local Salvation Army band.
And where's that, Brian?
That was in Tilsley.
Tilsley. Okay.
Yeah, we had a little corps there. Of course, all. My family went. My brothers went. My sister went. She was in the songsters and timbrels and everything else. And of course, my aunties and uncles were heavily involved. All my cousins. So. It felt like the Taylor Corps at some, there was that many Taylors belonging to the Corps.
Yes.
But they had a little band. We joined the you sort of get dragged up in all sorts of music when you saw it, which was again a fantastic introduction to music, if you like, whether it's singing or whatever you're doing, watching the timbrels or whatever it was. There was some sort of rhythmic music going on in the core.
Yes.
And I think that's a good thing. And you learned how to phrase tunes because you were listening to the songs being sang, you know.
Yes.
I think it was invaluable.
And it was hymn tunes first and foremost, wasn't it, in the Salvation Army? I mean, that's what your purpose as a bandsman was there.
That's what you were there to do.
Was to accompany so you got to play a lot of hymn tunes,
lots
which of course now have become the training method for most bands, isn't it? Most bands start with a hymn tune session.
Absolutely, yeah.
And train them.
That's right.
And certainly I was talking with the officer here at Sydenham Corps about how things have changed since the old days. That in my days growing up in the Salvation Army, your whole life revolved around the Corps. You did nothing else other than run to the Sally Army.
That was right. That was it. Everything was revolving around that Corps.
I mean, there's no real TV in a sense, or video game or anything. Right. So your social life, everything.
Yeah, we used to have to go to. Well, it was 3 times on a Sunday.
Yeah. Morning,
afternoon, and night, evening service. So it was a big dedication, if you like, to it, wasn't it?
Yes,
your
absolutely.
Sundays every Sunday would take we're going there.
I grew up in Scarborough, which is a seaside corps, and so in the summertime we had the beach meetings on top of that.
Oh, wow.
So we did an awful lot of marching down to them and things. But I have to say, I loved it. I enjoyed it because it was bandy, it was playing.
Well, that's right. Yeah. I loved the playing side. I really did. I enjoyed it, even though there wasn't many of us in the band. Maybe about a dozen players on a good day.
And then in the early days of Faireys, Brian, who was your who were the conductors when you first joined the band?
Wow. Well, when I first joined, of course, Harry Mortimer used to come down to the band room maybe once a fortnight. He was still associated with the band. And then Walter Argridge, Professor Walter Argridge was involved.
Yes.
He was known as the wee professor. This time he was quite a character, he was. Roy Newsom did his spell there. Who else have we got? Richard Evans, of course.
Yeah, of course. A long time.
He didn't do a great deal with the band, but he was there nevertheless.
Yes. I mean, you talk about some legendary figures from the world of brass banding there, aren't you?
Yeah.
I mean, all the greats from the
Major Parks.
Really, was he there? Yes.
Yeah. Jeffrey Brand. Yeah, Jeffrey Brand did a spell.
Wow.
All different characters, different something to offer. You know, and I tried to take little bits of everything what they had to offer.
Yes.
You know, you take them in and very enjoyable.
And I mean, brass. If you look at the world of test pieces, if you think back in those days, it was a lot of it was Eric Ball, you know, Journey to Freedom, that type of stuff. I mean, there's been a massive transformation, isn't there, between then and 2019?
Yeah.
I mean, a massive difference.
Unbelievable change. Well, I feel fortunate to have gone through that time, if you like, and still kept playing. I suppose in them days, they didn't have a percussion sections like they do now, where you need about 4 players to go, or sometimes 5 to go on a contest. In them days, you were lucky if you had 1.
Yes.
And you had a side drum and a cymbal. And that was it.
Yes.
So
I mean, I remember stories my father, who was a trombone player, telling about test pieces in the 40s and 50s where there were no percussion. It was just brass.
That's right.
It was just brass players, and it was thought that percussion would confuse the adjudicator, or you would cover up stuff.
Yeah, that's right. I think the first time they had percussion was, I've got a feeling it's 1969.
Was it?
But I stand to be corrected. I'm sure someone of your listeners will come back and come to haunt me. And I think it was Spectrum. Gilbert Vinter, Spectrum. I think it was. I remember going that day listening,
He was a bit of a change, wasn't he? Vinter changed from the old Eric Ball stuff.
It was very much. I mean, what people must have thought as soon as they've seen that Spectrum. Yeah. And it is really a challenging piece of music.
Still is,
even now.
Still is.
And it doesn't feel dated in any way, shape or form.
No.
It still feels up to date. I think it feels like one of those timeless pieces.
Yes.
It will always feel new.
Yes. I'm trying to think what else I played of his. It was Triumphant Rhapsody. Is that
Triumphant Rhapsody? That Vinter as well. Yeah.
There was a few, wasn't there?
He did quite a few.
Was it James Cook, Circumnavigator?
Circumnavigator. Symphony of Marches, of course.
Yes.
I think we lost him too early. I think he died a little bit too young.
He did. Yes, he did. I think
because I'm sure there was a lot more to offer there.
Yes. Yeah, I think so, yes. And the innovation continued, of course. I mean, our set test piece here in Northern Ireland for October is Connotations. Wow. Edward Gregson, and that was... yes. Edward Gregson, of course, has Salvation Army roots. His parents were... in fact, he was brought up in Scarborough. He's from Scarborough. His sister still lives there. So, but Connotations was with those perfect fourths stacked
wonderful.
up was just
wonderful writing. At the time, it was wow. What is
absolutely
this? It took the country by storm.
Yeah,
all this
groundbreaking stuff, wasn't it?
Oh, fabulous!
Groundbreaking stuff, and it's continued. Yeah.
You mentioned. Sorry, I'm going to diverse here. Okay. You mentioned Eric Ball. I was fortunate enough to play under Eric Ball.
Really?
At a little place, a town called Beaminster in Dorset. We do a concert there every year. We have done, I've been probably about nearly 40 years there going down. And we play in a church, St Mary's Church in Beaminster Village. Oh, sorry, I must correct that. It's a town, not a village. Or else I'm going to get my knuckles slapped. So it is a town, yeah. And Eric Ball used to come to the concerts, and I don't know how old he was, but he was quite a frail old man then.
Yes.
And one particular year, we managed to get him to conduct the band.
Wow.
And so we'd arrived down there. I'm not sure when it was. Probably the Sunday morning, or we'd get there Saturday, and then we had a short rehearsal Sunday morning. The concert was in the afternoon, of course. And Eric Ball came down early on and took us through this. What was his piece?
Journey to Freedom.
Journey to Freedom, of course. Yeah. And he took us through our paces with this, it was great to see. What a dainty little guy he was, but unbelievable talent.
Yeah, a real giant.
Can't believe it.
My grandmother, who was a lifelong Salvationist and not really a fan of brass bands, to be honest, she always used to say when the band would play something by Eric Ball, I hate Eric Ball, he ruins a good tune. But she was very conservative in the music.
I tell you what, I wish he was around now.
I tell you what.
And writing some of those tunes, what he can write.
Yes. Yeah.
I really do. I think it's fantastic scoring what he used to do.
It is. He's a
what a trained guy.
I mean, some of the modern stuff now feels like it's been written and altered and re-entered into Sibelius and stuff. Just computer speak, isn't it? It's hard to. It's hard to get a handle on some of it.
I mean, it's hard to think going back to the Eric Ball days when he used to work for the SA.
Yes.
With all these scores and writing the music like they didn't have the technology like they do now. There were no Sibelius, like you say.
They were handwriting it.
Handwriting, pen and pencil and paper, writing the scores out.
And then the parts.
Yeah,
and then
that's right.
The parts. Terrific. I mean, I played when I was at college. I played in a band called Collegiate Brass, which Eddie Gregson took, and we played Connotations on manuscripts, handwritten manuscripts, before it was done. So that was. But again, the amount of hours it must have taken to write Connotations by hand.
Yeah.
And boring, copying from a score. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've done it. I've done it, and tedious.
Yeah, it is
tedious
very
stuff.
Much so.
Yes. Well, Brian, if you had to pick one, and this is putting you on the spot. What's your favourite test piece over the years?
You really have put me on the spot there.
Maybe there's more than one. I don't. Maybe
it's very difficult to. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to pick 10.
Okay.
This. What? I like, believe it or not, this is not my favourite, but if I said I like Fireworks.
Yes.
I'll probably get my head cut off for saying that, but I like that. Probably at the time I didn't think so, but now I listen to it now and I've got a different pair of ears on, I suppose.
Yes.
And I think, what clever writing.
Yes.
What at the time, wow. Yes. That was another piece that changed the way people thought about the music.
Yes.
Fabulous.
Yes.
That I like Derek Bourgeois as well.
Yeah.
I like his music. Of course, I like the traditional Eric Ball music. I think that's beautiful, wonderful, different music. Yeah. So I can't put me I can't say one piece.
No, I'd appreciate that.
It's odd,
yes.
but I cannot say one piece.
I also think for players, it's a lot to do with what your part's like.
Of course it is. Yeah, of course,
I always say my favourite moment is the start of the third movement of Year of the Dragon after you've got through the trombone solo.
I can bet.
I think that's brilliant.
I've got rid of that. Yeah, it's a feeling of wow.
Every time I hear that, I think, that was always my favourite start of movement because of the stress of.
Yeah, that's another one I've not mentioned. That slipped me mind, but there's another good. Wonderful piece of music, Year of the Dragon, isn't it? And
absolutely, yeah. That repeated dig at the
then
start.
You've got all the spark pieces that I've never even mentioned, but there's another wonderful composer.
Yeah, I mean, he's a real bandsman's composer. I mean, it's a joy to play, and his parts they're so well written, aren't they? They're so well crafted for the instrument.
He knows how to score for brass bands.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Peter Graham, of course.
Yes.
There's another one. He's still being used today. Of course, he wrote the piece for the British Open this time. So, there's some good writers about.
Yes.
And I suppose a lot of them have this Salvation Army background.
They do, a lot of them,
I mean,
certainly Peter Graham does, yes.
Peter was.
Yeah, and Eric Ball, obviously. I mean, I think he came out at the end, but he was a full-time officer for a long time, but Eric Ball, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
And was in the publishing department at Judd Street.
I think, all in all, they've churned out a lot of good musicians, the Salvation Army.
They have, absolutely, yeah. And I suppose the greatest, one of my greatest joys about it, having moved here and then left the Salvation Army because it doesn't exist in the rest of the province, was when they took the band off outside, as we would call them, outside bands, playing army music, and that we can now buy.
Yeah,
the Red Shield and Starlake and all that stuff, and relive them.
It really is good.
Because it's a massive resource for the brass band movement. That huge library of Salvation Army music.
Yeah, it's a shame all them composers were deprived in a way of scoring for bands outside the Salvation Army, isn't it?
Yes, and it was a very strict system, wasn't it? They weren't allowed, and that each piece had to have a hymn tune.
Yeah, it had to have a religious aspect to the music, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And Brian, from your point of view, what's your? We have youngsters involved today in the brass band here today. What's your practice routine? Would you say? What things would you emphasise if you were teaching a youngster?
Don't give up, no matter how hard these things challenge you. At first you might think, wow, this is hard work. Whatever we do in life, if you want to be good or successful or just play for an hobby, just anything, it requires work. And unfortunately, you've got to stick at this. It's too easy to switch on the computer and do all the things that don't require very much physical effort. And as you know, playing an instrument is physical, mentally and physically. And you can't do anything else. Whilst you're doing that, you can't be thinking what's on the telly. You're too wrapped up in trying to achieve what you're trying to, play notes, reading notes. Stick at it because it does get easier, it gets better. And, you can join bands, you can join ensembles, bring a bit of culture to this electronic world we seem to be living in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Brian, thanks a lot. That's been an absolute education and a fabulous podcast. Thank you very much. And having heard you rehearse, especially Ruslan and Ludmilla this morning, can I say I've never heard a cornet player sounding better than you sounded this morning. It was an education to hear you guys sight read Ruslan and Ludmilla this morning. It was fabulous. Brian Taylor, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
If you've enjoyed the podcast, please let your friends know and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, or you can check out our website for all the latest arrangements at brassmusicstore.com.